sorry. I'm sorry. I've been so busy with personal stuff lately that I haven't been able to sit down and talk about the elephant in the room, right? Something that nobody else is really wanting to acknowledge yet. And the situation is escalating and it really needs to be addressed. I don't know if I'm like the first person to come out and say it. I don't know if this is like considered a hot take or if people are in the process of acknowledging it, but it's very obvious to me that Elden Ring Shadows of the Erdtree is not a popular DLC. People aren't playing it, they're not talking about it, they're not enjoying it. Now, right now, we're in this weird position where FromSoftware is doing their typical thing of having their shills, people like Asmongold and Moist Critical come out and try to say that like, well, actually, the game is perfect. People are only complaining about it because it's too hard. If someone could get through all of Elden Ring, do you really think they would be upset about the difficulty? Right? This is the problem with FromSoftware, and the reason I cannot stand them and their fanboys is that like every time someone talks about their games, how finicky they are, like how slow paced they are, like the combat, the glitches, like the frame rate, the bosses, like the cheap one shots, like they all just like do this thing where they're just like, yeah, is it too hard for you? Like, never mind the fact that I've played and beaten far more difficult games than Dark Souls, right? That I am an extremely experienced player who knows what he's talking about when it comes to like difficulty in games and what is good and challenging gameplay. Like Elden Ring, no FromSoftware game is difficult. Like they're just cheap, right? They don't explain to you critical mechanics. They're obtuse, right? They're not well designed, interesting games, right? There are so many more better action-packed games in this genre that do the same thing but better, right? Monster Hunter chief among them. Like FromSoftware has not been doing anything new or interesting in their entire history, essentially, right? They have always been outclassed by other developers. Armored Core was outclassed by all the other mech games out there, and of course Tenchu was destroyed by Metal Gear Solid to the point where people don't even realize that like Tenchu predated it as a stealth game. Like FromSoftware is just not a very good development studio, right? And I do think this DLC it really is a very good indication of that because if people were really enjoying this DLC, if they were really talking about it, right, you would be seeing all this like real positive just like coverage of the game. But no, like the first instinct of the FromSoftware fanboy is to come out and do damage control for people who aren't enjoying the game and are like bringing up all the very numerous issues, right? And this is the big thing I've noticed, browsing V casually. Like I said, I've been busy and haven't been able to keep up with it all that much, but like I have been following along with like the speculation and the leaks, and like the reveal, right? Like I have seen this firsthand. Like I have seen the hardcore FromSoftware fanboys come out and say that like, wow, they really took Radon, a fan favorite boss from the base game, and made him the final boss of the DLC, right? That is disappointing, right? They really reused a bunch of assets. They really did not elaborate on any of the lore bits that people actually wanted elaborated on, and just focused on a handful of popular characters, right? Like they didn't do anything new or interesting with this DLC, right? This game went from like a game of the year contender to just being this thing that people are just like desperately trying to do damage control for, right? That is the current situation of Shadow of the Erdtree, is that people are desperately trying to pretend as if like, oh man, this is the most difficult game ever. Oh, this streamer spent 50 hours trying to beat the final boss. Like, okay, but I'm still not gonna buy it. I'm still not gonna play it. Like, why would I? Nothing I've seen from this game indicates that it's fun. And I do think this is the big major takeaway to get from this is that like I don't think people have fun playing these games. The entire appeal, the entire like obsession is based around like the status symbol of being able to beat a FromSoftware game, and then like the lore community, like very in a very distant second, where people speculate like all their weird fringe fan fiction theories about like how Michaela is trans and that like he's sending people out to breed with like it's just like I don't know. Okay, like I don't follow the lore. I don't know how like ridiculous it's gotten. Like I know like Dark Souls is carried entirely by the YouTube lore community. Anyone who tells you that Dark Souls has a good story is full of crap. Vadi Vidya putting on a voice and making some weird theory video about like why that guy was stuck in the tower basement is just like who cares? Like these characters aren't interesting. The world isn't interesting. It's not fleshed out. It's not interesting. It's not well told, right? It's not even that dark when you really think about it, considering that like it's all destined to happen. It's just a endless cycle, bro. Like, come on. Like, I don't enjoy Dark Souls. I don't enjoy anything about it. I don't enjoy the community. I don't respect them. I think is the big thing to take away from this. Because like when you really look at like how Nintendo fans act, us superior gamers, yeah, we're willing to like criticize video games, right? We're willing to address that, like, oh yeah, Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door wasn't great. Like Luigi's Mansion 3 didn't have as good of a combat system as Luigi's Mansion 2, right? Pikmin 4 was casualized. Like, like we're willing to bring up like, real issues that these games have. And I do think that the Elden Ring DLC is a really good example of this. Like, I don't see the same behavior with the FromSoftware community. Every time someone criticizes the game, it's always the same thing. Like, oh, you just don't understand it. Oh, you just need to get good. Oh, you just got filtered by the difficulty. Like, it's the same thing over and over and over again. There is no room for nuance. Like again, uh, it was very difficult for a long time to kind of acknowledge that Dark Souls 2 was kind of disappointing, right? That Bloodborne wasn't as good as it was hyped up to be. That like Sekiro was disappointing and didn't deserve to win Game of the Year, right? Like again, um, it's very difficult to really establish any flaws these games have because the community just dismisses them as intentional, right? I'm reminded very strongly of like one of the best observations I've ever seen from a Dark Souls critic, a FromSoftware critic. It was the Zanzibar meme, right? Because all the lore all everything the lore videos boil down to is just random lines of dialogue from random NPCs, right? Like, oh, Zanzibar, forgive me. Like, again, the reason why that became such a meme and why it stings so badly and why people still complain about it to this day is that it is true, right? From slap games are not well made. They're not interesting. They're not engaging. Like they are entirely carried by the community. Like without the community, without the lore videos, without like this endless hike cycle, the damage control from like people like Moist Critical, the most boring man on YouTube, right? Like Dark Souls really fundamentally has nothing going for it. 10, 20, 15, 10, 20, 30 years from now, people are still going to remember and play like Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. Nobody's going to remember FromSoftware. Nobody's going to remember like Baldur's Gate 3 or like whatever else came out last year, right? Pow World, right? Like Tears of the Kingdom, like it's kind of remarkable, comparing Tears of the Kingdom versus Elden Ring, because like the narrative has always been like, oh, Elden Ring, it's so much bigger and better than Tears of the Kingdom. Oh, it's so much more popular, and yet like somehow Tears of the Kingdom is still reaching new milestones, reaching new heights, reaching new audiences. People are learning more and more about it and appreciating it more, while Elden Ring has just suffered a major letdown. This was supposed to be the release that solidified Elden Ring as an all-time classic, but in reality, I think Shadows of the Erdtree is nothing but a boat anchor holding this game back and preventing FromSoftware from moving on to something better. They chose to produce Armored Core 6 instead of making this DLC good. That is really, really something that the audience needs to think about.